Hello and welcome back to Storytime with Alex, reading the epilogue of From Albion to Britannia Book 2, The Last Witch of Old Albion by Brandy Pearson. Tying up any loose ends. It's only short, so get nice and comfy and we'll read the epilogue afterwards. It was a strange January in the Triangle. The story went about that Mr. Campbell had taken on too much with Attrag and the community centre and had some kind of a breakdown. He was the one who had kidnapped the cats and kept them in a shed, but no one really knew why. A friend of Miss P's, called Rose Cooper, had freed them with the help of the Burtons, that's us, and a couple of friends, including the nice retired priest who was helping out at St. Mary's. The Campbells sold their house, Mrs. Campbell sold her business, and they moved away to the country. It was all very sad and a bit disturbing. When Mr. Campbell had his breakdown, the other active members of Attrag all reassessed their lives. What had seemed an idyllic little breakwater in West London had proved to be as full of stress as anywhere else in the metropolis. By the end of February, the Browns had moved to the Scottish Highlands, the Christies had returned to Australia and were last heard of living in Perth, and the Carters had gone to Northern California. Dad and I looked at where they had gone on a map. It seemed they were trying to get as far away from the Triangle as they possibly could. We wondered how much of this was because of the trauma of what had happened, and how much was down to whatever Sebastian had said to them in the Browns' front room. Sebastian wandered into Hyperborea one day and chatted to the lady who was working there. It seemed that something had happened to Deirdre Campbell, and she had lost all interest in magic. She'd sold the business to a mystery buyer, who got in what Sebastian called a couple of old hippies to run it. It started to sell fewer strange books and more crystals and relaxation tapes, flower remedies and scented candles. The mystery buyer was, of course, Father Joe. The second term at school was much better. Going to school was so much easier than being floated over a roaring chasm that I relaxed. I found a couple of like-minded friends, and we formed a school 40ing club once we had explained it to the teachers, and my dad had come and given a talk on UFOs. However, we never talked about magic or wizards, because the other members of the club thought that would be going too far. In the spring, work was being carried out in Albury Gardens when the remains were found of what seemed to be an old chapel. Although there were no remains above ground, the crypt was almost intact. Many excited archaeologists came to study it because very few circular chapels had ever been found. There was speculation that it had something to do with the Benedictine monastery that had stood in what was now the big park, but when the secret tunnel was discovered, it somehow reinforced the idea that this had been a secret church of the Knights Templar, who were known to have circular churches, like the Temple Church in town. This could not be proved, but brought many visitors. A secret benefactor provided funds to turn it into a centre for peace and reconciliation. 3 Benedictine monks came to live together in the Campbells' old house to run it, and work closely with the newly appointed Community Centre Committee, who now included my mum and Mr. Jackson. The secret benefactor was, of course, Father Joe. Ruth and I discovered that being floated over a roaring chasm was the sort of experience that tended to cement a friendship. That and my attempt to rescue her, even though it didn't really work. We would meet at the weekends from time to time, often in Big Park near the ruins. My friend from school once saw me with her and spent the week teasing me by saying that my girlfriend was a witch. I'd learned by then to laugh off this kind of thing. Where does a story end? That seems to be as difficult to find as the beginning. So I'm going to finish this just before the next Halloween. I'm trying to get the story finished so I can print it out and give a copy to Miss P for Christmas. I hope she'll put it in the folder with the other stories of the witches of Old Albion. Rose, Sebastian and Father Joe do not need to keep such a close eye on the Triangle any more now that the thin place is gone. I sometimes feel sad to think that no one will ever see the wizard Sebastian Jones walking the streets of the Triangle in the middle of the night chanting his protective spells. However, they're all still around. Sebastian and my dad have become really good friends. They go to the pub together from time to time. Mum says they start talking about Fortiana and end up talking rubbish after a couple of pints of beer. Rose is now well known in the Triangle, in the sense that she is known as Miss P's friend who has a way with cats, but no one knows anything else about her. Ruth introduced her to her mum as a friend of Miss P's, who must be a distant relation, because she had family in Hastings before the First World War, and the same green eyes as Ruth, her mum, and her grandma. They became good friends, and in the summer holidays they went on a trip to Hastings with Miss P and me. They went to the Fisherman's Museum in the old chapel, and to the Shipwreck Museum. Miss Cooper was very affected by some of the old photographs of the fishermen. There was a video showing how difficult it could be to bring the fishing boats on shore when the sea was rough that brought a tear to her eye. To thank them for bringing her, she paid for them to go into the great modern art gallery and brought them tea in the cafe upstairs that looked out over the beach where the fishing boats lay. Ruth continued to hate her school, and finally her mum took her out of it and enrolled her in the school that specialised in drama and music, where there were no uniforms and she fits in much better. She's still not my girlfriend, and I'm not so sure that she is not a witch. She visits Rose on her own quite regularly. It turned out that she had inherited more than the green eyes. I once found her in a corner of Big Park singing to a rosebud that was unfurling as she sang. I promised not to tell anyone. Recently, I've noticed she has started to wear red and green clothes with all the goth black, and even the occasional splash of gold. And then, so maybe she's the last witch of Old Albion. No, because we're not in Old Albion anymore. Okay, that is me interpreting things too far. Okay, well, that was the end, and I really hope you enjoyed it, and a huge thanks to my mum, Brandy Pearson, who wrote, designed and illuminated this wonderful book. And fear not, this is not the end, because I have an exclusive copy of book 3 in From Albion to Britannia, The Last Wizard of Old Albion, and I will start recording that soon. So yeah, look forward to seeing you then. Bye.